As human beings, we are part of groups. We are social creatures. We long for social significance. But what we should always remember is that there's always the individual experience that you will go through. You can be a member of a prestigious group. That group owns the factories. That group owns the clubs. That group owns much of the export. So you can belong to that group. Though to birth, you're born into a family with a lot of money. And you will be treated as part of that group in a prestigious manner. When you are with the group. When you're walking down the streets without any of the group members around you, you'll have an individual experience. If you don't have a paranormal backup nor a supernatural backup, people may rob you. Or they may take out their anger on you if you are low in rank from that group. If you're high in rank from that prestigious group, they will treat you in a very kind way because they hope to get something from you. That's the individual experience. Where the individual experience is experienced as positive or negative, it doesn't matter. You will always have the individual experience as a human being. That does not mean that you are a separate entity, completely independent from the rest of human species. No, you're not. You're designed to be part of the human community and to be part of small communities. You're meant to be part of groups, but you will always have your individual experience as an individual being. And that is something that a lot of people forget. Now, let's talk about what they call interracial couples or interethnic couples. It's a better word for it. When you are sexually involved with someone from another ethnicity, you as a couple together, you will have a common experience when you walk together in the streets. Let's say you have a white woman or from a Caucasian woman with, let's say, a Nigerian man. So he's a black guy or he's an African guy. When the two are in town, somewhere in the West, they'll be treated as a couple. And though to the presence of the white woman, he will be favored because he's accepted because he's associated with the white woman. But what if he walks down the streets without his white wife or white girlfriend, and people only see a black, dark-skinned man? The treatment he will receive will be far different than the treatment his wife or his girlfriend receives. He will go through some unpleasant things that his wife would never go through. So what he goes through, his wife cannot understand because she doesn't go through similar things. She may still be indoctrinated by thinking, well, if you just adapt to society, people will accept you. While deep down inside, she knows that this skin color obsession is still going on in her community. So you have the experience as a couple, there's the collective experience, and you have the experience as an individual. You will always have the individual experience. Let me give another example. You can be treated with honor because you belong to a baseball team that's well known in the country. But within the baseball team, you may have other team members that can't stand you. So you have the individual experience of you receiving contempt from other team players, but towards the outside world, you are a team together, and as a collective, as a team, you receive honor from outsiders. So the individual experience is always there. Now, in the West, there's an obsession with the individual experience. And people want to maximize the individual experience in the sense that they want the individual experience to be as comfortable and as easy as possible. That is a narcissistic delusion. That is not possible at all. Because first of all, you are a social creature. So you can't maximize your individual experience because your individual experience takes place within a group context. Because you're treated a certain way by other people. That's the experience you go through. So your individual experience depends on others, even though it's an individual experience. Nevertheless, the individual experience is there. There are two extremes. One is to maximize the individual experience is the most important thing ever. And the other extreme is to pretend as if the individual experience is non-existent. Now, both work in a destructive manner. The right way is to acknowledge that, yes, you are a community creature with an individual experience as part of you being a community creature. You should never ignore your individual experience, because your individual experience is where your discernment is. Let me repeat that. Your individual experience is where your discernment is. Okay, let me give an example. Let's say you have a group, okay? And this is an experiment that was done, but I'm modifying the example just to fit this message, okay? This parable is based on an experiment that was done. Some of you who are familiar with social sciences may know which experiment I'm talking about. Let's say you work in a hospital, and there's this patient that comes in, and he's tied to an electrical wire. And the police comes in. They say, we need to interrogate this individual. And every time the individual tells a lie, he should receive a painful shock. So you work at the hospital, you get the orders from your boss to comply with the police. So you think, okay, we need to comply with the police. This guy is a patient, so we should care for him as a patient, but he's also a criminal. So we need to comply with the police. So the police interrogates the suspect, and the police give a sign anytime a shock needs to be given to the guy. So you and your colleagues, you're there, and whenever the police gives a sign, you give a shock. After a while, the police tells you to increase the voltage of the electricity. So you keep doing it. Eventually, the voltage of electricity becomes dangerous to the health of the patient. And as a doctor, as a medical professional, you made a pledge, or you made an oath in which you promised to look after human well-being. So what the police ask you to do goes against the code of honor of your profession. But it's an authority figure, so you get along. So when the voltage is reached above what's acceptable, you think, okay, this is quite uncomfortable, but you get along. Eventually, the voltage is so high that then the patient can even die. And at this point, someone says, stop it. We need to cut this out. This man's going to die if you've given him shocks. And eventually, that individual leaves the room. And after a while, the police says stop. And it's over. Now, here's where my modification comes in. A few months later, the suspect has a lawsuit against the hospital. Why? Because the suspect made plain that the police harassed him and tortured him. And now, all you who work at that hospital, you have to give an account to the judge. And the prosecutors there also. And then the prosecutor asks you, sir, you work at that hospital, right? And you say, yes, I work there. As a doctor, you made an oath. You swore an oath that you would guard human health, right? And you say, yes, or else I'm not even allowed to work in this field. Then the prosecutor asked him, when they were increasing the voltage of the shocks, why didn't you open your mouth? And then you're thinking, okay, indeed, why didn't I open my mouth? And then the prosecutor asks you, sir, when that other doctor became upset and rushed out of the room, wasn't that an eye-opener to you that something was off with the situation? And you think, well, yes, it should have. You reflect back to realize that indeed there were too many red flags about the situation that you just didn't see. Now, I'm going to start the parable here. This is based on an experiment that was done. I believe multiple of such experiments have been conducted over time, in which psychologists proved that human beings have an appeal towards authority figures. We tend to get along with authority figures as long as we're part of a group that's under the authority of the authority figure. So we long to be part of groups. That's our social nature. And as part of our social nature comes that we cling onto authority figures. Why? Because God designed us to cling onto Him. But because the world is in a fallen state, we cling onto authority figures, which become false gods. So we cling onto those false gods, and those false gods get a grip on us. And demons work behind those false gods. That's what happens in the world. In a group, you experience group dynamics. That's a group experience you'll have. And in group dynamics, you forget that you are an individual being together with other individual beings. And there's nothing wrong with that. In group dynamics, you can achieve a lot. You can build a house, you can build a street, you can build a supermarket, you can build institutions. There are a lot of good things you can do in group dynamics. So there's nothing wrong with that. But what if the group is heading in a wrong direction? Are you alert enough to realize, hold on, this is getting out of hand, or this may turn out ugly? It often goes like this in the world. When a group is heading in the wrong direction, most of the members don't realize it until it's way too late. Those that do realize it are often shut down by the others. And this is something you recognize all over the world. Your individual experience is silenced when that individual experience exposes things people don't want to see. When your individual experience exposes something people don't want to see, then they will shut down your individual experience in the sense that they will silence you. They will censor you. Now, in every group in the world, there are people that have bad experiences, often due to their own expectations or due to other factors involved. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when a group of people firmly believe in something that doesn't add up. And your individual experience reveals that the thing they're clinging on to is not real. But because people are so invested in a thing that's not real, they don't want your individual experience to receive any attention. Because your individual experience will cause them to reflect on what they're holding on to. And they don't want that. So, in this world, your individual experience is only praised and embraced if it validates the expectations of the collective. So, understand that your individual experience is part of your discernment. If you walk by faith and you realize that a lot of the people around you that claim to follow Christ, they're actually following teachers of demons, when your individual experience shows you that that is the case, and there is evidence for it, then you should never doubt your own senses. Too often, we place doubt on our own senses because we want to fit in with the group. Now, wanting to fit in with the group, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. There is nothing wrong with wanting to fit into a group. But the moment you have to numb down your own senses to be part of a group, that is the point you need to leave the group. If a group requires you to numb down your own senses, then you need to leave the group. Why? Because once your senses are numbed down, you will not be able to recognize red flags. And that's why many groups have initiation rituals. In an initiation ritual, your senses are numbed down. And because your senses are numbed down, you won't notice any red flags while being part of the group. And because you don't notice any red flags, because your senses have been numbed down, you'll be very, very loyal and very comfortable for the group. You'll get along with anything in the group. You'll defend the group. You'll praise the group. But here's the thing, because you don't notice any red flags, you will be in danger before you know it. And before you know it, you'll be in enabling danger onto yourself and others. And that is why I'm telling you, your individual experience matters. Your individual experience is not always right. I mean, if you have wrong expectations and therefore you have a bad experience, then your bad experience is a result of your wrong expectations. Then you need to repent and be renewed in your mind, okay? But then your individual experience shows you that you need help, that you need to be delivered. If you are delivered and you have the right expectations and you have a bad experience with something, that means that something is off. Too often, believers ignore their own senses because we want to fit in with what other believers are saying. Believers who themselves need deliverance. Not all believers walk by faith. This sounds very abominable, and it is. Not all believers walk by faith. There are still many believers that walk after the wrong expectations of the world. When you are around other believers who are not delivered and your radar goes off, then pay attention to it. Your individual experience matters. And when you realize that your individual experience reveals that something is off and others are not open to receive it, then you might need to consider to distance yourself from those people. And another thing, if your individual experience shows you that there's greatness or something good in something, that's good also. And here's the thing, if your individual experience shows that there is potential for good and for greatness in something and people are not open to it, that's also a red flag onto you, because that shows you those people are not interested in solutions and that they don't want any better. So for you to remain part of that group means that you need to forfeit the better and what's good for you, to remain in their misery so they are at ease at your expense. So whatever the situation is, regard your individual experience. Not because you rely on your individual experience, but because your individual experience reveals what's going on. Well, that's it for now. Keep agreeing with Christ and be at peace.